The Count went to collect a debt, but froze when he saw his former maid and her children in misery. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Armand de Villiers rode through the narrow road with the calm assurance of a man who believed he understood his duties. Dawn had barely lifted the mist from the fields, yet the Count had risen early, eager to complete what he considered a simple obligation. A debt, recorded years ago in one of his steward's ledgers, remained unresolved. The amount was small, insignificant to a nobleman of his standing, but formality required that he verify it in person. He did not expect the task to take more than an hour. His horse's hooves struck the frozen ground with a steady rhythm. Armand's posture remained straight, rigid with the discipline ingrained since childhood. The countryside of Saint-Aubin had always seemed distant from the concerns of the estate, and he seldom ventured into the villages unless ceremony required it. Today, however, he came out of a sense of order, not generosity. When he left his manor, he imagined a mundane encounter, perhaps an argument with a stubborn tenant. Nothing more. The village appeared slowly beyond the bend. Small stone cottages, worn fences, smoke rising from chimneys in thin, threadbare lines. As Armand dismounted, children paused in their chores to stare at him. Mothers pulled scarves over their heads, and men straightened their backs with a mixture of caution and resignation. A nobleman's presence rarely meant good news for them. A woman selling bread near the well bowed her head. Armand acknowledged her with a curt nod. He approached and said, "Good morning, I am searching for Claire Duval. Would you happen to know where she resides?" The woman's eyes shifted uneasily. "She lives at the end of the road, Monsieur le Comte, the cottage by the old ash tree." The tone was respectful, but a shadow passed over the woman's face. Armand recognized it. Hesitation, perhaps pity. Yet he decided not to linger on it. Villagers always carried a tendency to dramatize their neighbors' misfortunes, and he had no interest in gossip. "Thank you," he said, turning toward the indicated path. He walked rather than remounted. Something about the quietness of the road urged him to move more slowly, though he could not have explained why. The air felt heavy, as if the winter had settled with unusual harshness upon the village. He reminded himself that his visit was brief. He expected Claire to be resistant, maybe embarrassed, perhaps even defiant. He remembered her only vaguely from her years at the manor, a diligent maid with soft manners who had resigned without warning. As he approached the last cottage, he noticed how different it looked from the others. The roof sagged slightly at one edge, the door hung crooked on its hinges. A weak curl of smoke rose from the chimney, barely enough to warm a single room. The ash tree beside it looked almost skeletal. Armand paused. Something felt wrong. He knocked. A long moment passed without sound. Then soft footsteps shuffled behind the door. It creaked open just enough for him to see a woman's face. Claire. He stared. She had changed so profoundly that for a heartbeat he wondered if he was mistaken. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips pale, her posture weak. Her hair, once neatly tied in the manor's kitchens, now fell loosely around her shoulders. She wore a shawl so worn he could see patches beneath it. Yet her eyes, those he remembered, they held the same quiet warmth, dimmed now by exhaustion. "Monsieur le Comte," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He cleared his throat, unsettled by an emotion he could not define. "Claire Duval, I have come regarding a debt recorded under your name." She lowered her gaze at once, as though she had expected the words. "Yes, I know." Before Armand could speak again, two small faces appeared behind her, a boy and a girl, both thin, both staring at him with wide, cautious eyes. They clung to her skirt with fingers that looked too small, too fragile. Armand blinked. "These are your children?" Claire stepped instinctively in front of them, shielding them although he had shown no threat. "They are mine," she said softly. "Please, forgive their presence. They should be by the fire." The eldest child, a boy perhaps 6 or 7, whispered, "Mama, who is he?" Claire pressed a finger to her lips, but her voice trembled as she answered, "He is the Count, the master of the manor." A moment hung between them, heavy, uncomfortable, filled with something neither fully understood. Armand tried to regain his composure. "I was notified that your debt has remained unresolved for several years. The amount is small, but it must be addressed." Claire nodded quickly. "I know, monsieur. I have not forgotten. Her tone was steady, yet her body swayed slightly as if standing upright required more strength than she possessed. Armand noticed the way she placed a hand against the wall to steady herself. Her breathing seemed shallow. You appear unwell, he said. Should you not sit? I am fine, she answered. It has only been a difficult morning. Another gust of cold wind brushed past them. The children shivered. Claire tried to usher them back inside, but the movement drained what little strength she had left. She staggered. Armand reached forward instinctively. Careful. She tried to wave him off. Please, But her knees buckled. Armand caught her before she fell, his hands gripping her arms firmly yet gently. The children let out frightened cries, unsure whether to flee or stay. Claire's head rested against his shoulder for a moment, her breath faint. Claire, Armand said urgently, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. Forgive me. I did not mean to show weakness. This is not weakness, he said, though he was not sure she heard him. Neighbours appeared at the doorway of their cottages, drawn by the children's cries. A few approached, forming a small circle around the Count. Their expressions were a mixture of concern and something else, something like quiet accusation. An older man spoke first. She has not eaten properly in days, Monsieur le Comte. A woman added, she works as much as she can, but the winter has been harsh. The little ones need more than she can provide. Armand felt a knot tighten in his chest. Why has no one sent word to the manor? I would have— You would have, the old man interrupted gently, though not disrespectfully. Forgive me, monsieur, but villages learn not to trouble the nobleman. We solve our own burdens, unless they concern debts. The remark struck deeper than Armand expected. He opened his mouth to respond, but the weight of the villager's gaze silenced him. Claire stirred slightly in his arms. Her voice was barely a breath. Please, let me stand. I need to explain. You should rest, Armand replied. She shook her head weakly. Not yet. He helped her to her feet slowly, supporting most of her weight. She leaned against the doorframe and looked up at him with eyes filled not only with exhaustion, but also embarrassment. I will repay the debt, she whispered. I do not know how, but I will. I will not allow you to think I seek pity. I came for information, not humiliation, Armand said quietly. I only need to understand your situation. Her expression tightened. My situation is not for you to worry about. Claire, you can barely stand— That is my affair, she interrupted, though her voice softened immediately after. Forgive me, I only mean— I do not wish to be indebted to anyone's pity. Armand studied her face. It held dignity even in ruin, pride even in despair. He could not understand how she had fallen so low, nor why she faced it alone. Something inside him shifted, a faint pull of responsibility, though he could not identify its origin. I will return later, he said. We need to speak properly, away from the cold. She nodded faintly. As you wish. He turned to leave, still unsettled by everything he had seen. The children clung to her skirts again. One of them, the boy, watched Armand with a strange intensity. Not fear, but something closer to recognition. Armand stepped away, his thoughts tangled. He had taken only a few steps when a small voice behind him called out, Monsieur le Comte. Papa? Armand froze. Armand turned sharply, certain he had misheard. The boy stood half hidden behind Claire's skirt, his small fingers clutching the worn fabric. His voice had been soft, tentative, almost confused, yet the word hung in the cold morning air with a weight that seemed to press against every pair of listening ears. Claire reacted first. She spun toward her son with a mixture of alarm and pleading in her expression. Louis, no, she murmured. Do not say such things. The boy lowered his head, but his eyes lifted again toward Armand. But, Mama, he looks like— Enough, Claire whispered, her voice trembling. The villagers exchanged glances. Some stepped back, others leaned forward as if expecting a storm to break. Armand, however, felt something entirely different, a sharp blow of confusion, followed by a strange, unwelcome sensation in his chest. He approached slowly, aware that any sudden movement might frighten the children. Claire, he said, why would your son say such a thing? Her face flushed with embarrassment. He is a child. He speaks without understanding. Please, forget what he said. Armand's eyes moved to the boy. "Did someone tell you that word?" Louis shook his head. "No one told me, I just thought—" The girl beside him tugged at his sleeve as if warning him to be silent. Claire stepped in front of them again, shielding them with her body. "They are tired," she said quickly. "They say many things when frightened." "They did not seem frightened before," Armand replied. "They stared as if they recognized me." Claire's lips tightened. "Please, monsieur, do not press this." Armand, unused to being dismissed so firmly, felt the instinctive rise of authority. "Claire, I must understand." She lifted her chin with sudden resolve. "Understand what? That I am a woman who has struggled alone? That my children have no father to claim them? That the world will always assume the worst? You have no reason to involve yourself in this." Her voice cracked on the last word. The villagers shifted uncomfortably. Armand could see that she was fighting to keep her dignity intact. "I did not mean to cause you pain," he said. "Then leave," she whispered. He hesitated. Duty urged him to step back. Something else, something unfamiliar and unsettling, urged him to stay. The older woman near the well approached cautiously. "Claire, let the Count help you," she said gently. "You have carried too much by yourself." Claire stiffened. "No, this is my burden." Armand studied her, seeing the exhaustion beneath her pride. "You fainted in my arms," he reminded her. "That is not a burden you can continue carrying alone." She blinked, her eyelashes trembling, but she did not answer. At last Armand exhaled. "Very well, I will give you time, but I will return this afternoon." Claire's voice dropped to nearly nothing. "I would rather you did not, and I would rather not be left in ignorance," he replied. She looked away. Armand mounted his horse and rode back through the village, aware of every pair of eyes following him. But the village seemed less important now. His thoughts circled only around the boy's question, the fear in Claire's voice, the way the children had looked at him. He reached his temporary lodging and dismounted mechanically. His steward, Lambert, stepped outside. "You returned sooner than expected, monsieur," Lambert said. Armand removed his gloves slowly. "Lambert, tell me, how much do we know about Claire Duval's departure from the manor?" Lambert frowned. "Very little, monsieur. She resigned on short notice. I recall your mother was displeased, though she did not say why. Did anyone speak to her before she left?" "I believe Madame la Comtesse spoke with her the day before," Lambert answered. "But I was not present." Armand stared at him. "And the debt? Why was it assigned to her?" "The records listed as overdue rent for a small tenant room near her mother's house. When she left the manor, your mother requested that all outstanding accounts be settled. Claire never returned to complete the payment." Armand's jaw tightened. "Did she have the means to pay?" Lambert hesitated. "I cannot say. She left quickly. Some servants whispered, but you know how gossip spreads." "What did they say?" "That she left because she had complications, personal ones." Armand inhaled sharply. "You mean the children?" Lambert lowered his eyes. "Many assumed they were yours, monsieur." Armand stiffened. "That is absurd." "Perhaps. But servants create stories when they see a young maid leave suddenly, and when she returns months later with a child, they draw conclusions." Armand felt heat rise in his chest. Indignation, confusion, something else he could not name. "I never—" He stopped, unwilling to finish the sentence. "Lambert, send someone to inquire about the steward who left years ago, the one who managed the lower servants' accounts." "The steward?" "Monsieur, he abandoned his post without notice. Tracking him now would be difficult." "Try," Armand ordered. Lambert bowed. "At once." Armand spent the next hours pacing the room like a man trapped in his own thoughts. He replayed every moment he had seen Claire at the manor. Glimpses, really. A girl carrying linen. A quiet smile offered in passing. A humble dedication to her duties. He had barely noticed her. He had certainly never considered she would leave under distress. And yet she had. And now she lived in a broken cottage, raising 2 children alone. When afternoon came, Armand found himself already walking back toward the village before he realized he had made the choice. The villagers watched him again as he passed, some with curiosity, others with quiet approval. A few nodded politely. He ignored them all and continued to the ash tree cottage. He knocked. This time Claire opened sooner, though not fully. She looked steadier than before, but her eyes carried the traces of weariness. "You returned," she said softly. "You expected I would not? I hoped. I cannot leave matters as they are." Claire exhaled slowly. "The villagers must be speaking already. I am not here because of rumors." "Then for what reason?" "For clarity," Armand said. "And for responsibility," she frowned. "Responsibility? Toward me?" "Toward the truth," he corrected. "Claire, your son called me something I cannot ignore. I must know why." Claire closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering courage. "Louis is a child," she said. "He sometimes imagines things to comfort himself." That was not imagination. It was misunderstanding. "Of what?" She hesitated. "Of the world, monsieur. Of what he sees and what he wishes to see." Armand studied her face. "He thinks his father abandoned him." She stiffened. "That much was clear," Armand continued. "And if he saw me as a replacement, then he must believe his father was someone of my standing, or someone connected to me." Claire stepped back, her hand tightening around the door. "Monsieur, you are crossing into matters that do not concern you." "They concern me if my household played any part." Her breath caught. "Your household did play a part." The words struck like cold water. Armand leaned in. "Explain." Claire shook her head quickly. "Not now. Please." "Then when?" "Never, if I had my way." Armand's voice softened. "Claire, I saw your suffering. I saw your children's fear. You owe me no apology, no defense. Only the truth." Her eyes glistened. "You speak as if truth costs nothing. For me, it costs everything." "Then let me bear part of that cost." She stared at him for a long moment, the wind lifting loose strands of her hair. A single tear slipped down her cheek, though she brushed it away before it reached her jaw. "You do not understand," she said. "If I open the past, I open wounds I have spent years trying to close." "Then let me hear them," he answered quietly. "Not as your master, as a man who wishes to make amends." Claire swallowed hard. "I do not need your amends." "Your children do." Her breath faltered. At last she whispered, "Very well, but not here, and not now." "Then when?" Armand asked. "Tomorrow," she said. "At dawn." "Where?" She hesitated again. "Come to the old willow beyond the fields. No one will see us there." "Claire," she raised a hand, silencing him, "if you truly want answers, you must come alone." Armand nodded slowly. "I will." She lowered her gaze, her voice barely audible. "Monsieur, be prepared. Some truths are colder than winter." He felt a tremor move through him. "Whatever it is, I want to know." Claire stepped back into the cottage. "Tomorrow, then." Armand turned to leave. But before he reached the road, Claire's voice called faintly from behind him. "If you force the past open, you may not like what you find." Armand barely slept that night. Though the inn was warm and the bed comfortable, he felt as if he had returned to his youth, when his father's stern expectations had kept him awake with the fear of failing unspoken duties. But this was different. This was not duty in the traditional sense. This was something he could not name, a pull toward truth mixed with a weight of responsibility he had never anticipated. Before dawn, he was already walking toward the willow tree beyond the fields. Frost clung to the grass, crunching beneath his boots. The horizon glowed faintly, promising daylight, but not yet delivering it. The willow's long branches swayed gently, a lone shape in the stillness. Claire was already there. She stood with her back to him, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She seemed so small against the winter landscape, yet her posture carried a quiet resilience. When she turned, her gaze met his with a mixture of determination and dread. "You came," she said. "I said I would." She nodded slightly. "I did not sleep, nor did I." Her eyes flickered. "Then let us begin quickly. I do not wish for the children to wake and find me gone." Armand stepped closer. "Claire, I do not want to cause you distress." "You already have," she replied softly. "But that is not your fault. The truth has been waiting a long time." He hesitated. "Your son's words, 'Children speak from what they feel, not what they know,'" she interrupted. "Louis has always sensed a void. He does not understand its shape, only that it exists. And that void made him look at me and say, 'He said it because you are a man of authority, well-dressed, respected. To him you resemble the type of man he imagines a father should be.' It was not accusation. It was longing. Armand felt the explanation settle over him, but not fully. Then why did the villagers assume the children were mine? Why did the story persist for years? Claire looked away. Because I would not tell them the truth. Why not? She inhaled slowly. Because the truth was worse. Armand blinked. Worse? Yes. She met his gaze again. Because it was not one man who failed me. It was a household, a system, a world where some voices carry weight and others disappear. He stepped closer. Claire, speak plainly. I need to understand. She pressed her hands together. I will tell you everything I can bear to tell, but you must promise not to interrupt. I promise. She took a slow breath, as if steadying herself against a memory she did not wish to revisit. You remember nothing of the day I left the manor, she began. No, he admitted. I expected as much. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. I was a maid in your mother's service. I kept to my duties, I spoke little, and I avoided any trouble. For most of my years there I felt safe. What changed? Your household changed, she answered. New servants arrived, new expectations, and one particular steward. He oversaw the lower ranks, including the maids. He was charming at first, or so it seemed. He praised my work, offered small courtesies, made me feel seen. Armand frowned. Which steward was this? You would not remember him, Claire said. He left the manor suddenly, long before I returned to the village. But at the time he had enough influence to make my life easier, or harder. Armand felt a slow burn of unease. Did he mistreat you? Not at first, she said. At first he only spoke kindly. He asked about my family, my hopes, my worries. I was young. I had little experience in matters of the heart. I believed he meant what he said. Armand clenched his jaw. And then? Then he asked me to meet him in the garden after dusk, she continued. He said he wished to speak without fear of gossip. I agreed, thinking it was innocent. She paused. Claire, Armand said gently, if speaking of this pains you, you do not have to continue. She shook her head. I must. It is the only way for you to understand. He remained silent. When I arrived, she said, I realized quickly that his intentions were not what I had believed. He tried to persuade me that affection between servants was common, that no one would care, that it was better to live freely than to follow rules that kept us miserable. And you refused him? Yes, she replied, but refusing him had consequences. The next day he assigned me twice the work. He criticized everything I did. He spoke ill of me to others. I became the subject of whispers. Armand felt the cold seep deeper into his bones. Why did you not tell someone? Tell me? Tell my mother. I tried, Claire said. I went to speak with your mother. I thought she would listen. But when I entered her sitting room, she dismissed the matter before I could explain. What did she say? That I was imagining attentions where none existed, that Maid should avoid creating scenes, that young women too often misinterpret kindness from men above their station. Armand exhaled tightly. He could almost hear his mother's voice in those words. That was when I decided to leave, Claire continued. I feared that staying would make things worse. I feared being dismissed in disgrace. I thought resigning quietly was the best choice. He studied her. And the steward. He left a few weeks after I did, she said. No one knows where he went. I doubt he wished to remain long after losing someone he had hoped to control. Did he? Armand hesitated, unable to phrase the question. Claire understood. No, he did not harm me in the way you fear, but he harmed my reputation, and that alone was enough to destroy any chance of returning to the manor. Armand breathed more easily, yet shame still clung to him. His household had failed her. Worse, he had been ignorant of it all. And the villagers thought the child was mine because... He trailed off. Claire nodded. Because I would not tell them his name. I wanted to protect the child from gossip. I let them think what they wished. It seemed easier than telling them I had been made a fool by a man who never loved me. And the second child? Armand asked softly. That is another story, she whispered. One I will tell you another day. Armand stepped closer. Claire, you lived through this alone. You bore humiliation and hardship in silence. Why did you not reach out to me? Why did you not write? I did write, she said quietly. I wrote to you months after leaving, Not to ask for help, but to warn you about the steward. I never received a response. Armand felt something inside him break. I never received your letter. I know that now, she said. At the time, I thought you simply did not care. Claire, I would never... I understand that now, she said again. But for years, I believed I meant nothing to the people who had once employed me. The wind rustled the willow branches. Silence stretched between them, heavy with truths newly exposed. Finally, Armand spoke. Claire, I need to ask something else. When you returned to the village, did you tell anyone the steward's name? No. I wanted to leave that part of my life behind, and the villagers assumed the worst. Yes, he studied her face, the quiet strength, the sorrow, the resilience. She had endured far more than he could have imagined. At last he said, I must know his name now. Claire shook her head. No, monsieur, knowing it will not help you. It will, he insisted, because I must understand who in my household betrayed their duties. She closed her eyes. Very well. His name was Julien Caron. Armand repeated it silently. He remembered faintly, a steward with clever eyes and a quick smile, someone who had seemed capable, someone Armand had barely noticed. He felt a sharp sting of self-reproach. Claire, he said, I swear to you, I will not let his actions remain hidden. She looked away. What difference does it make now? It makes every difference, Armand said. For justice, for truth, for you. Claire's shoulders trembled faintly, and for a moment she seemed close to letting her guard fall completely. But she did not. Instead, she whispered, There is more, monsieur, something I have not told you, something about Louis. Armand's breath caught. What is it? Claire hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the edge of her shawl. Her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hesitation. I never wanted to speak of this, she murmured, but you must know. Louis was not the only one affected by Julien's cruelty. Armand stepped forward. What do you mean? Claire's voice dropped to almost nothing. Julien was not the only servant who wished to take advantage of a maid who had no one to protect her. Armand stared at Claire, stunned not by the words themselves, but by the quiet anguish behind them. She was not trembling from fear nor from shame, but from the exhaustion of carrying memories no one had ever offered to share. He stepped closer, careful not to startle her. Claire, he said quietly, what are you trying to tell me? She wrapped her arms around herself. After Julien began spreading his lies, others felt emboldened. Not in terrible ways, not with force, but with words, looks, proposals whispered in corners where I could not escape notice. They believed I welcomed attention simply because I had spoken with him once by the garden wall. Armand's jaw tightened. Who were these men? Kitchen hands, grooms, a footman or two. Nothing dangerous, she said quickly, as if fearing his reaction, but everything humiliating. Every day another suggestion, another snicker, another man who spoke to me as if I were a creature without dignity. I withdrew from them. I worked in silence. I kept my eyes low, yet the whispers grew stronger. And no one intervened? Armand asked. Your mother did, Claire replied, but not in the way I had hoped. He breathed in sharply. What did she say? She summoned me, Claire answered, her voice tightening. She said a maid with rumors attached to her name could not remain under her roof, that even the perception of impropriety was enough to stain the household. She said I should be grateful she allowed me to leave quietly instead of dismissing me publicly. Armand closed his eyes briefly. He could imagine his mother's tone, firm and absolute, ruling with a conviction that left no space for contradiction. She should have sought the truth. Truth did not matter to her, Claire said softly. Order did. He opened his eyes again. And this is why you left? It was the final reason, she whispered, but not the only one. Armand felt the cold pierce deeper. What else? She turned her face slightly, as if fearing he might read too much in her expression. Julien spoke to me one last time before I left the manor. He suggested that if I stayed, the rumors would worsen. He said a woman alone in service should not cling to pride, that I should accept protection from someone who could offer it. Protection? Armand repeated, anger flickering beneath his composure. He wanted me to depend on him, Claire said, to accept his attention, to let him control the story that had already begun destroying my name. I refused. He warned me I would regret it. She swallowed. I suppose in some ways I did. Armand's voice deepened. What he did was manipulation, cruelty. You deserved none of it. Claire offered a small, tired smile. Life often gives us what we do not deserve, monsieur. I learned that early. He stepped closer, unable to remain still. Claire, why did no one tell me? Why did no one speak? Because the truth did not serve them, she said. And because no one believed a maid's word against a steward's. Armand lowered his gaze, guilt settling heavily around him. I should have seen it. You could not, Claire said gently. You rarely lingered in the servants' quarters. You were distant from the rhythms of those who worked beneath you. I never blamed you for that. I blamed myself for trusting the wrong person. Armand looked up sharply. You should never blame yourself. She shrugged lightly. Perhaps not. But when one lives alone, it becomes easy to place blame on the only person left. A silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of the willow branches. Armand searched for words, but found none that felt worthy. Claire spoke first. I know you have more questions. Yes, he admitted. Many. Then ask. Louis, Armand said. If Julien was not his father, then who? Claire's expression faltered. A flicker of pain crossed her face. Julien believed he might be. He asked once, laughed, really, if I had carried his child. But I told him the truth. And the truth is, Armand pressed gently, that Louis is not his, she said firmly. I would not have survived carrying a child of a man who mocked me. Then who? Armand asked again, his voice quiet, careful. Claire stepped away from him, walking a few paces toward the willow. She touched one of the low-hanging branches, her fingers curling around the delicate strands. I will tell you, she said, but not today. Armand stiffened. Why not? Because the truth about Louis is not finished, she replied. There are pieces I must place in order before I can give them to you, and before I can give them to myself. Claire, I cannot help you if I do not know. You cannot help me until you accept that some truths come slowly, she said, and that pushing them too soon would only reopen wounds that have barely begun to heal. He exhaled deeply. Then tell me something I can hold to. Tell me why the villagers thought his father worked under my roof. Claire turned back to him, her expression softer now. Because they guessed, because I refused to offer explanations, because I came back with a newborn son and kept his father's name hidden. Armand's jaw tightened. So they assumed the father was a nobleman? No. They assumed he was a man with influence, Claire said. Not noble, not powerful, just someone who had been close enough to matter. All they knew was that I had returned from service with a child, and they believed you were the only man I had ever spoken to respectfully. Armand blinked. Me, yes, she whispered. You never noticed. But you were kind to me in ways others were not. You spoke to me as though I were a person, not an object. The villagers knew that. They saw the way I carried myself after returning. They saw I still held a certain reverence for you. Armand felt his breath catch. Claire, I was young, she said softly, and I admired you more than I should have. That admiration followed me home. People saw it. They made their own conclusions. He stared at her, understanding dawning slowly. So, Louis thought a father could be someone strong, Claire finished quietly. Someone he had never met, someone he imagined might look like you. Armand felt the weight of those words settle inside him with unexpected force. He whispered, and yet his true father remained a secret. Claire nodded, because the truth would have given him no comfort. He stepped closer again. Claire, if his father is still alive, I must know. She shook her head quickly. He is gone, long gone. Dead? Gone from our lives, she said. He made his choice, and I made mine. Armand studied her, sensing the conversation had reached a threshold she was unwilling to cross. Her eyes held a plea, not for pity, but for space. He softened his tone. Claire, you said there were others in the household who spoke in ways that caused you shame. Yes. And that my mother dismissed your concerns. Yes. And that you left to protect what little dignity remained. Yes. Armand breathed slowly. Claire, you have carried all of this alone. Her lips trembled. Yes. He reached out, not touching her, but standing close enough that she could feel the sincerity in his voice. "Then let me carry something now. Tell me how I can help." She drew in a slow breath. "You cannot help me with the past, only with the present, and only gently." "I will be gentle," he said. Claire's eyes shimmered, though she did not blink. "Louis is not Julian's son," she whispered. "But there is something about his birth, something about the man involved, something I have never told anyone." Armand leaned closer. "Claire, tell me." She shook her head once more. "Not today. The truth must come in its own hour." Armand exhaled sharply in frustration. "Claire," she lifted her hand, stopping him. "But I will tell you something else today, something that matters." "What is it?" She hesitated only a moment. "The children are not brothers by the same father," she said. "My daughter's father has nothing to do with the first, nothing." Armand stared, startled. "Another man?" "Yes, a man of kindness, a man who saved me when I was ill, a man who did not live long enough to see the child he left behind." Armand's breath slowed. "Claire, how many losses have you endured?" "More than I ever speak," she whispered. "More than anyone needs to know." He swallowed hard. "Then why tell me any of this?" "Because you keep asking for pieces of me," she said quietly, "and I keep giving them little by little, but the whole truth that is something I have never surrendered." Armand took a single step closer. "Then give it to me." She shook her head once more. "Not all of it, not yet." "Then what can you tell me now?" Claire looked at him with a depth he had not seen before, a depth filled with both fear and a strange, trembling hope. "If you truly wish to know whose children they are, return tomorrow at dawn." Armand returned to the village before sunrise, driven not by duty but by a restless urgency he could no longer deny. The cold bit at his hands, yet he barely felt it. The thought that Claire had trusted him enough to ask him back again stirred something inside him, something uneasy, something heavy, something he did not yet have a name for. When he reached the willow, Claire was already waiting. She stood with her shawl wrapped more tightly than the day before, as though bracing herself not only against the cold, but against the words she had resolved to speak. "You came," she murmured. "I told you I would." She nodded. "Then let us begin. I want this truth spoken before I lose my courage." Armand stepped closer, careful not to stand too near. "I will listen." Claire drew a long, steadying breath. "The first thing you must understand is that Louis was not born in Saint-Aubin. He was born in a small village between here and the coast, where I spent the first months after leaving the manor." Armand frowned. "You left the region entirely?" "Yes. I wished to disappear. I wished for no one to find me, to ask questions, to judge me any more than they already had." "Were you alone?" "Completely." The word hung between them. "I had saved a small amount from my years of service," she continued. "Not much, but enough for a few weeks of lodging. After that I worked wherever I could, washing linens, mending clothing, cleaning kitchens, anything. I never stayed in one place long, fearing someone might recognize me." "Recognize you?" Armand asked softly. "Was the shame so great?" "It was not shame," Claire said. "It was fear. Fear of what gossip could become when spoken by those who had never known kindness." She waited a moment before continuing. "After a few weeks I realized something was changing in me. I was ill every morning, tired beyond measure. At first I thought it was the strain of travel and work, but soon the truth became impossible to ignore." "You were with child," Armand said. "Yes," Claire whispered. "And I had no one. No mother, no sister, no employer, only myself and the growing life inside me." Armand felt a heaviness he could not dispel. "Claire, why did you never seek help from the manor, from me?" She met his gaze with quiet sorrow. "Because I believed you would turn me away. I believed I had no right to ask anything of you, and I feared your mother more than I feared hunger or cold." He could not argue with that. Claire continued. "I survived the first months by working harder than I should have, but one evening after a long day I collapsed in the middle of the road. I woke in a small cottage belonging to an elderly couple. They took me in for a short time out of simple kindness, but when the wife realized I was expecting, she grew uneasy. 'People talk,' she said, 'and talk is dangerous.'" She paused. "So I left again." Armand clenched his hands. "You should never have been alone. Life gives us what it chooses," she said quietly. "Not always what we need." "And the father?" Armand asked. This man, you still have not said who he was. Claire shook her head slowly. You must listen to the whole of it, or the truth will seem heavier than it was. He nodded. In the 4th month, Claire went on, my strength failed. I fell ill. Fever, dizziness, weakness so great I could barely rise from bed. I had found work in another village by then, but the woman who hired me realized quickly I could not continue. She sent for a traveling physician who passed through the region each winter. Armand listened in silence. He was young, Claire said softly, gentle, serious, but with a quiet warmth I had not felt from anyone in a long time. His name was Etienne Rousseau. He treated me with patience. Respect. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Armand's chest tightened, though he did not know why. He visited daily for a week, Claire continued. Brought broth, herbs, even blankets. When the fever broke, he warned me I would not recover entirely unless I rested. I told him I could not. I needed to work. I needed to prepare for the child. What did he say? He said, you should not face this alone. Claire's eyes softened at the memory, though it was shadowed with sorrow. I told him everything. About the manor, about Julian, about the whispers that drove me away. I told him I had been foolish and trusting. And what was his response? He said I had done nothing wrong. Armand felt something twist inside him, regret, perhaps not for anything he had done directly, but for everything he had failed to see. Etienne stayed in the village longer than planned, Claire said. He said he wished to ensure I regained my strength, but soon it became clear he stayed for more than duty. Armand inhaled slowly. You cared for him. Yes, she whispered. He was the first man who looked at me without judgment, without expectation. He spoke to me as if I were worthy of respect, not a servant, not a fallen woman, simply Claire. And Louis's father? Claire looked at him steadily. No, Louis was already growing in me when I met Etienne. Armand froze. Then he was not Louis's father, Claire said firmly. He never claimed to be. He only offered me support, guidance, and comfort when I needed it most. Armand felt a strange relief mingle with confusion. When Etienne prepared to leave, Claire continued, he asked if he might write to me. I agreed. But a few weeks later, I learned he had taken ill in another town. The fever that struck me did not spare him. He died before I could send my first reply. Armand bowed his head. Claire, I am sorry. She smiled faintly. He left me a letter before he departed the village. He wrote, you deserve a life free of fear. Promise me you will seek one. And did you? I tried. She let out a quiet breath. After he died, I returned to Saint-Aubin. I thought the familiarity would help me raise my child. I thought the villagers might be kinder than strangers. I was wrong. The gossip, Armand murmured. Yes. Claire nodded. They saw a young woman with a newborn and no husband. They made their assumptions. And they believed the father was someone from my manor. Claire's silence was confirmation enough. Why did you not correct them? Armand asked softly. Because I wanted to protect Louis, she said. If they knew the truth, that his father was a man who took advantage of a servant, Louis would carry that shame forever. I would not allow that. Armand exhaled, overwhelmed by the quiet courage of her decision. And then, Claire continued, my daughter was born 2 years later. A child with Etienne's eyes. A child he never knew. Armand nodded slowly. And you have been alone since. Alone, she repeated, but determined. He stepped closer. Claire, you have endured more than I can comprehend. You should have come to me. I thought you would turn me away. I would not. You say that now. He fell silent. Claire continued, her voice more fragile now. I have told you most of the truth, monsieur, but there is something more, something I never wished to speak aloud. Armand straightened. Tell me. She looked down at her hands. When Louis was born, I swore to myself I would never speak the name of the man who betrayed me. I wanted to bury that part of my life, but you seek the truth with such insistence, and perhaps it is time you heard it. Armand's heart quickened. Claire, he said gently, whatever it is, I will not condemn you. She shook her head. It is not I who fear condemnation. Then who? She lifted her gaze to him, her voice trembling. His name is Julien Caron, she whispered. But Louis is not his. Armand frowned. Then who? Claire looked away. The man who fathered Louis, served under your roof. Armand stared at her, the breath leaving him at once. Her lips parted as if the next words hurt more than any she had spoken. The father of my son was a man I trusted, someone I believed would protect me, someone who spoke kindly, until the day he vanished. Armand's voice was barely a breath. Tell me who he was. Claire hesitated, her eyes clouded with a mixture of fear and resignation. He was your steward's assistant, she whispered, the one who managed the storerooms. Armand's blood ran cold. His name, he said quietly. Claire, I need his name. She stepped back, her voice breaking. I will tell you, but you must prepare yourself, monsieur, because you knew him. You trusted him, and the truth will make you question everything you believed about your household. Armand felt the world narrow to a single heartbeat. Claire raised her eyes to his, gathering what little strength remained. His name is... Claire opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came at first. She pressed a hand to her shawl as though steadying her breath. Armand waited, the cold air stretching between them like a held blade. His name is Henri Marot, she said at last. He worked in your storerooms for nearly 3 years. Armand searched his memory. The name surfaced slowly, like a shape rising from murky water. Henri had been quiet, competent, always punctual. A man who moved through the manor like a shadow, never causing trouble, never attracting attention. Armand remembered him because he had seemed unremarkable in every sense. Henri? He repeated. You are certain? Claire nodded. He was kind to me in the beginning, gentle in a way I trusted. He worked near the kitchen often, and we crossed paths each evening when I delivered linens to the storerooms. He spoke softly. He never pushed. He offered help when he saw I carried too much. For a time I thought he was simply considerate. And then he began asking questions, Claire said. Not like Julian, never boldly. He asked about my family, about whether I had sweethearts in the village. When I told him I had no one, he seemed pleased. Armand felt a frown form. One night, Claire continued, he walked me home after my shift. It was nothing improper. He said the corridors were poorly lit, and he feared for my safety. I believed him. I thanked him. And perhaps that was the moment he thought he had been given permission to hope for more. What happened next? Armand asked. For a few weeks, nothing, she said. He watched me with a tenderness that felt harmless. He helped with tasks beyond his duty. He spoke with sincerity, and I was naive. I did not see how his kindness slowly tangled itself into expectation. Armand stood utterly still. Then, Claire said, when Julien's whispers began spreading, Henri grew distant. He asked me whether the rumors were true, whether I had ever met with Julien in secret, whether I had given him reason to speak of me. Armand's jaw tightened. You told him the truth. Yes, Claire said, but he did not believe me. Or perhaps he wished not to believe. It is easier for some men to accept lies that hurt them than truths that humble them. Armand said nothing, but his silence carried the weight of guilt. Henri avoided me for a time, Claire continued. He rarely spoke to me except in brief greetings. And then, when I resigned from service and began preparing to leave, he came to see me in the laundry hall. What did he say? That he cared for me, Claire whispered. That he wished to protect me. That if I stayed, he would speak to the steward on my behalf. That he would shield me from gossip. That he could give my life stability. Armand remembered Henri now, quiet, deferential, a man who seemed terrified of making mistakes. He asked me to give him a chance, Claire said. He asked if I would consider a future with him. Armand inhaled slowly. And did you? She lowered her eyes. I wanted a friend. I wanted someone to believe me. I wanted gentleness. And for a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine that he could be all those things. Armand waited. But when I told him I planned to leave the manor regardless, Claire said softly, his expression changed. He accused me of choosing Julian. He said I had made a fool of him, that I had toyed with his affection. I tried to explain, tried to tell him Julian meant nothing to me. But Henri was not listening. She paused. He left the manor the same day I did. Armand blinked. He left, yes. He vanished. I never saw him again. And months later, when I realized I was expecting, I understood the truth. I had been wrong in ways I did not wish to admit. Armand stared at her, confused. Claire, forgive my bluntness, but you told me Henri never harmed you. You said he did nothing unforgivable. I said he did nothing unforgivable by the standards of our world, Claire said. Not by the standards of my heart. Armand felt a chill. Claire, what happened? She lifted her gaze, full of quiet sorrow. Henri did care for. He cared so much that when I tried to end his hopes, he grew desperate. I saw it only later, how his anger mixed with longing, how his disappointment clouded his judgment. On the night before I left, he came to speak with me again. I was alone in the laundry hall. He said he loved me. He said he feared losing me. He asked me to stay one last time. Armand felt his breath slow. Did he hurt you? Claire shook her head. No. He did not force or threaten or trap me. He was only a man who begged for comfort I could not give, and I was a woman too frightened, too worn, too desperate to think clearly. She swallowed. I agreed to meet him in the storeroom later that evening. I do not know why. I was weak. I was tired. I felt guilty for disappointing another man, and Henri looked at me with such sorrow that I wanted to ease his pain, even if only with my presence. Armand's stomach tightened. He dared not speak. When he asked to hold me, Claire said quietly, I allowed it. Nothing more. A moment of closeness between two lost people, but Henri believed it meant something deeper. When I pulled away, it broke something in him. She folded her hands. He left without a word, and that was the last time I saw him. Armand spoke with care. Claire, are you telling me that Louis is Henri's son? She hesitated, then nodded once. He is. Armand let out a slow breath. The truth, for all its weight, had an unexpected simplicity. Louis's father was not a villain, not a man of cruelty, but a man who had loved unwisely and left her alone with the consequences. Yet a single piece still troubled him. Claire, he said, if Henri loved you so deeply, why did he leave you pregnant and alone? Her voice trembled. Because he never knew I carried his child. I discovered it weeks after he vanished. And by then, I had lost any means of finding him. Armand felt an ache he did not expect. He does not know, she repeated, and perhaps it is better that way. Better? Armand echoed. Yes, she whispered, because I do not know whether he would have accepted the truth, or whether he would have rejected it as he rejected everything else when his heart was wounded. She looked away. He was a good man, but not a brave one. And Louis deserves a father who is strong. Armand stepped forward, his voice low and steady. And what of your second child? You said her father was Etienne. Claire nodded. Yes. She is the child of a gentleman who saw my worth before anyone else did. They stood under the willow in silence for a long moment. The truth settled around them. Messy, fragile, human. At last Armand spoke. Claire, your life has been shaped by the failures of men under my roof. Men I should have guided, overseen, protected you from. I cannot ignore that. You did not know, Claire said softly. I should have, he insisted. Ignorance is not an excuse. Before Claire could answer, footsteps approached through the frost. Claire stiffened immediately. Armand turned to see Lambert hurrying toward them, breathing hard, carrying a folded document. Forgive the intrusion, monsieur, he said, but I found something you must see. Armand frowned. What is it? Lambert handed him the paper. A record buried in the old ledgers. It concerns Henri Marot. Claire inhaled sharply. Armand unfolded it, scanning the lines quickly. His eyes widened. Henri requested a transfer, Lambert said. 3 days before he vanished. Your mother denied it without informing you, and the reason for the request. Armand read the handwritten note aloud, stunned. Harassment among the lower staff has made my position untenable. I request permission to leave before matters worsen. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Armand looked at Lambert. Harassment? By whom? Lambert shook his head. No names are listed. Armand turned back to Claire, but she was no longer focused on him. She was staring past him, her face pale, her eyes wide. Claire, Armand asked, what is it? Claire lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the road. Armand, she whispered, someone is coming this way. Someone I never wished to see again. Armand turned quickly, expecting a stranger, or perhaps one of the villagers. But the figure approaching was neither hurried nor threatening. A man walked steadily along the narrow path, wrapped in a dark coat. His footsteps measured, his posture unfamiliar yet oddly deliberate. He was not tall, not imposing, but something in his gait carried an air of unease, as if he approached with hesitation rather than confidence. Claire's breath quickened. She took a step back, nearly stumbling against the roots of the willow. "Claire," Armand said softly, "do you know him?" "Yes," she whispered. "I know that walk. I know that coat. I know the way he lowers his head when he is unsure of his welcome." Armand's eyes narrowed. "Who is he?" Before she could answer, the man raised his head. His face came into view, a familiar face to Armand, though not a face he had seen in years. A narrow jaw, observant eyes, the expression of a man who avoided confrontation by anticipating it. Armand recognized him at once. "Henri Marot," he said. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. Henri stopped just a few paces away. He removed his hat with a slow, tense gesture and bowed, not out of courtesy but out of guilt. "Monsieur le Comte, Madame Claire—" Claire did not speak. Armand stepped forward. "Henri, you vanished from the manor. You left without notice. Why appear now?" Henri swallowed hard. I heard that Claire was unwell, that she was living in hardship. Someone from the village sent word to a cousin of mine. He wrote to me last week. I came as soon as I received the letter." Claire's voice trembled. Why now after all this time?" Henri's eyes softened, though he did not dare step closer. "Because I realized what I had done. I thought leaving would spare you more trouble. I was wrong. I should have asked if you needed help. I should have stayed, but I was afraid." Armand folded his arms. "Afraid of what?" Henri looked ashamed. "Afraid of seeing the consequences of my own actions. Afraid of learning that I had failed someone who trusted me. Afraid of facing Julien's lies and my own weakness at the same time." Claire's hands tightened around her shawl. "You left without saying a word." "I know," Henri whispered, "and I regret it every day." Armand studied him. "Did you know Claire was expecting?" Henri's eyes widened with honest shock. "No, God's truth, no. If I had known, I would have returned at once. I swear it. I would never have left her alone if I had known." Claire watched him with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "You never wrote, never asked if I had found work. You disappeared as if we had never spoken." Henri nodded miserably. "I was a coward. I admit it." Armand took a step closer. "Henri, Claire has endured years of hardship. You owe her more than apologies." Henri's gaze lifted, earnest and shaking. "I know, and that is why I came." Claire's voice broke slightly. "What do you want?" Henri took a breath. "To make things right if I can. To face what I fled. To ask forgiveness, though I know I may not deserve it." Claire lowered her gaze, torn between pain and pity. Armand's voice softened. "Henri, Claire's life now is not what it once was. You must speak truthfully. Do you come to claim a place in her life, or only to ease your conscience?" Henri hesitated, then answered with quiet honesty. "Both. I wish to ask forgiveness, and I wish to know my child." Claire stiffened. "Your child?" Henri looked at her with confusion. "Louis, I was told he is my son." Claire stared at him, stunned. "Who told you that?" "A villager," Henri said. "She said the boy resembles me." Armand exchanged a tense glance with Claire. Claire shook her head. "Henri, Louis is not—" Armand touched her arm gently. Claire let him speak. Henri continued, unaware of the storm he was stepping into. "If he is mine, I wish to take responsibility. I wish to help provide for him. I cannot erase the past, but I can be the father he never had." Claire covered her mouth with both hands, overwhelmed. Armand stepped between them slightly, not as an enemy but as a safeguard. "Henri, before you say more, there is something you must understand." Henri nodded. "Tell me." "Claire has lived through more than you know," Armand said softly. "And your place in her story is not as clear as you believe." Henri frowned. "I know I failed her, monsieur, but I am here to correct my failures." Armand took a breath. "You should hear the truth from her." Henri turned to Claire. "Claire, is Louis not—" Claire's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her silence was enough to unnerve Henri. "Claire, tell me, please." At last Claire found her voice. "Louis is not your son." Henri blinked. What? Claire repeated quietly, painfully. Louis is not your son. Henri's confusion deepened. But the timing, our last conversation. I thought. Claire shook her head. No, you and I, we shared only words. Nothing more. Henri staggered back a step. Then, who? Claire swallowed, her voice quiet. Louis's father was a man who left before you did. A man who believed whispers instead of truth. Armand watched Henri closely. Not you. Henri pressed a hand to his forehead. Then why did no one tell me? Why did the villagers say otherwise? Because they guessed, Claire said. Because I never corrected them. Because I wanted to protect Louis from the truth of who abandoned him. Henri flinched at the word. Abandoned, he whispered. Claire, I never abandoned a child. I would never... I know, Claire said. You abandoned me. But you did not know of him. Henri lowered his head, shame flooding him. After a long silence, he spoke again. Then why call me here? Why reveal this now? Claire hesitated. I did not call you. I did not know you were coming. Henri's eyes lifted to Armand. Then you... Armand shook his head. No. I summoned no one. Henri's confusion returned. Then who wrote to me? Claire frowned. You said it was a cousin. Henri nodded slowly. Yes. My cousin's wife keeps contact with distant relatives here. She said someone told her Claire Duval was near death, that her children were suffering, that the villagers blamed me. Armand inhaled sharply. Who gave that message? Henri hesitated. She would not say, only that the letter came with urgency. She insisted I come at once. Armand turned to Claire. Someone wanted him here. Claire whispered, But who? Henri looked at Armand, his face pale. Monsieur, when I returned to the region, I went to the manor first, hoping to seek guidance. But your mother is not there. Armand stiffened. My mother? Where is she? She left for Paris, Henri said. 2 days ago. Armand's pulse quickened. For what purpose? Henri shook his head. I do not know. But she left in great haste, and before she departed, she ordered the servants not to speak of Claire Duval ever again. Claire's breath caught. Armand stepped forward. Why would she do that? Henri lowered his voice. Because I believe she knows something she never told you. Armand stared at him. Henri swallowed. And I believe she is trying to keep you from learning it. Armand felt the world tilt, not from fear, but from a sudden, sharp rearrangement of everything he believed he understood. His mother, dignified, unwavering, commanding, had always run the manor with strict decorum. She knew every corner, every servant, every rumor. She had intervened in Claire's life before, and now she had fled without explanation, forbidding the very mention of Claire's name. Claire touched the trunk of the willow for support. Monsieur, what could your mother possibly know about me that she never told you? Armand dragged a hand through his hair. I do not know, but her sudden departure suggests intention. She is hiding something. Henri looked between them, guilt still etched in every line of his face, but now overshadowed by concern. I swear I came only to make amends. I did not expect to find all this. Armand breathed deeply, trying to steady his thoughts. Henri, your arrival is not the issue. The issue is why my mother left so abruptly, why she forbade the servants to speak Claire's name, and why someone sent word to your cousin without Claire's knowing. Claire's voice trembled. It must be a misunderstanding. No, Armand said softly. This is not coincidence. Henri tightened his coat around him. If I may speak freely, Madame la Comtesse always took the household's reputation seriously. Anything that could tarnish the family name was dealt with quickly. Quietly, often without your knowledge. Claire looked down. She dismissed me with dignity, at least. She allowed me to leave in silence. Armand frowned. Did she? Or did she ensure you left with your voice unheard? The question stunned Claire. She stepped back as though struck by an idea she resisted even entertaining. No, she simply believed the rumors. Henri cleared his throat. Monsieur, if I may, Madame la Comtesse questioned me once. Months before Claire left. She asked whether I had seen Claire speaking too warmly with anyone. She asked whether I believed Claire to be susceptible to influence. Claire pressed a hand to her chest. Why would she question you? Henri winced. Because Julien had already spread some of his whispers. He implied Claire had allowed impropriety. Your mother confronted him, but he used me as an example, saying I had grown too fond of Claire. Claire blinked in disbelief. I never knew. Henri met her gaze. You were innocent. You trusted me. But Julien twisted everything. Armand's jaw clenched, and my mother listened to him. Henri hesitated. She seemed troubled by what she heard, but she did not confide in me. She dismissed me with a warning, said I should keep my distance from Claire for her own good. Claire whispered, I thought she simply wished to avoid scandal. Scandal, Armand repeated bitterly. My mother feared it more than any hardship other people might suffer. A moment of silence fell, long enough for the frost on the grass to glisten with sharper clarity. Then Claire lifted her head. Monsieur, what if she left because she learned I spoke with you? What if someone told her you were asking questions? Armand's eyes softened. She would not run away from confrontation. She would face me directly. Unless, Claire whispered, she feared the truth more than your anger. Henri stepped closer. There is more. I heard something else, something strange, but I dismissed it until now. Armand turned to him. Speak, Henri swallowed. One of the younger maids said Madame la Comtesse had been searching through old letters and household records. She looked troubled, pale. She kept saying, he must not discover this. It must remain buried. Claire wrapped her shawl tighter. Discover what? Henri shook his head. I do not know. But whatever it was, she feared it would harm you. Armand felt a slow heaviness settle inside him. Not dread, not anger, but the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. I must find her, he said finally. Claire's eyes widened. Now? Yes. She will not tell you anything, Claire whispered. She will have no choice, Armand replied. Henri shifted anxiously. Monsieur, forgive my boldness, but she is your mother. She never bends unless she wishes to. Armand's voice grew colder, steadier. If her silence cost Claire her safety, her reputation, her future, then she will bend. She must. Claire touched his arm gently, her voice trembling. Monsieur, please. Do not blame her for everything. She was strict, yes, but she believed she protected her household. Armand met her gaze. Claire, she protected appearances, not people. Claire looked down. Henri glanced toward the village road. If you search for her in Paris, it will take days. Armand nodded. I know. And in that time, Henri added hesitantly, the villagers may begin speaking again, especially if they see me here. My arrival will stir more gossip. Claire's face tightened. Henri, you must be careful. People here enjoy adding shadows where there are none. Henri nodded. I will keep my distance until the truth is known. Armand turned to Claire. You will not face the villagers alone anymore. Her eyes softened, gratitude flickering there, though overshadowed by fear of hoping too quickly. Monsieur, she murmured, even if you learn the truth, it may not change what is already broken. Armand stepped closer. I am not searching for truth to change the past. I am searching for truth to change what comes next. Claire swallowed, overwhelmed. Henri cleared his throat. Monsieur, before you leave, I must say something more. Armand nodded. Speak. Henri's expression grew grave. I did not come here for forgiveness alone. Not entirely. There is another reason. Armand raised an eyebrow. Henri continued. When I reached the region, I visited an old friend of mine. He works in a merchant's office that handles correspondence between estates. Armand narrowed his eyes. Go on. This friend keeps records of letters sent and received. He showed me something. A note your mother sent months after Claire left. Claire turned sharply. A note? About me? Henri hesitated. Yes. A note instructing the messenger to destroy any correspondence addressed to you, monsieur, if it came from Claire Duval. Claire's breath caught. My letter. Armand felt a sharp blow to the chest. She intercepted it. Henri nodded. And destroyed it. Claire pressed her hand to her mouth. I wrote to you. I thought you ignored me. Armand shook his head slowly. I never saw a single word. Claire whispered. She silenced me. Armand shut his eyes for a moment. She silenced you to protect what? Her pride? The manor's name? Me? No, Henri said quietly. Not pride, not reputation. According to the merchant's record, the note contained a brief explanation. Claire looked up quickly. What explanation? Henri took a breath, bracing himself. She wrote that she could not allow you to receive Claire's letter because it contained something she called dangerous knowledge. She said it could change your life and burden your heart. Armand stared. Claire whispered, "Dangerous? What does that mean?" Henri's voice grew even quieter. The note said she had taken steps to hide the truth, that she had dealt with the matter for the good of the family. Armand's heart pounded. "Henri," he said, "what truth?" Henri hesitated, then looked at Claire with a mixture of sorrow and dread. "The truth about Claire's time at the manor." Claire stepped back. "My time at the manor?" "Yes," Henri whispered. The note said Claire did not leave of her own accord. Claire blinked, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Henri swallowed hard. The note said Claire was persuaded to leave, for reasons she never learned. Armand felt the air thicken. "Persuaded?" he repeated. "By whom?" Henri closed his eyes. "By your mother, and someone else who wished Claire gone." Claire's knees nearly buckled. Armand stepped toward Henri, his voice tightening. "Someone else? Who?" Henri opened his eyes, and the answer came like a cold wind cutting through all three of them. "Julien Caron." Claire's breath vanished, as if the cold itself had swept it away. She stood perfectly still, her fingers digging into her shawl, her eyes fixed on Henri, as though hoping she had misheard him. But Henri's expression carried certainty, not speculation. The truth was not a rumor. It was written proof, a note bearing the unmistakable authority of the Countess and the signature of the former steward. Armand felt the weight of it settle on his chest, slow and suffocating. The two people who had shaped the order of his manor, one by heritage, the other by ambition, had orchestrated Claire's departure. Not Julien alone, not his mother alone. Together, Claire whispered. "Persuaded. I was persuaded to leave." Henri nodded, though shame filled his gaze. "The note said Julien met with Madame la Comtesse shortly before you resigned. He told her you were becoming a distraction to the staff, that rumors would soon spread beyond the manor. He insisted that letting you stay would be a risk." Claire closed her eyes, remembering the cold dismissal from the Countess, the quiet severity in her tone that morning she was summoned. She had believed the rumors themselves had condemned her, that gossip had ruined her place. She had never imagined the steward had stood before the Countess, shaping the truth to his own intention. Armand stepped forward. "And my mother accepted this without question." Henri hesitated. "According to the note, Julien implied that you had begun noticing Claire, that she looked at you with admiration. He said other servants whispered about it." Claire's cheeks flushed with fresh humiliation. Armand's face hardened with disbelief. "That is a lie. I barely knew Claire then. I hardly spoke to her." Henri bowed his head. "Julien took advantage of your distance. He made it sound as though something improper might arise if Claire remained." Claire's voice trembled. "I never spoke to him of such things, never." Armand's eyes softened. "I know. Claire, I know." She looked away, struggling to hold herself together. Henri continued. "The note said Madame la Comtesse confronted Julien afterward, but instead of challenging him, she asked whether removing you quietly would spare the household a potential scandal. He agreed, and she asked him to handle it." Claire whispered, "Handle it." "He spoke to me the next morning. He said I should resign before the Countess dismissed me publicly. I thought he was warning me out of pity. I believed he was trying to protect me." Armand closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. "He manipulated you?" Claire nodded slowly. "Yes, and I believed him." For a long moment no one spoke. The willow branches swayed lightly above them, a quiet, tired music to accompany the unraveling of long-kept secrets. Armand stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Claire, you must understand, none of this was your fault. You were made a victim of others' fears and ambitions." She shook her head. "It does not matter anymore. What is done is done." "It matters," Armand insisted. "Because I allowed a household under my authority to drive you out. I let you disappear without knowing why, and you suffered because of it." Claire touched the willow trunk, steadying herself. "I have lived many years with these wounds. Hearing the truth does not erase them." "No," Armand said gently, "but the truth frees us from believing the lies were ever our own doing." Her eyes lifted to his, soft, tired, and searching for a calm she was not sure she could hold. "Monsieur." You speak kindly, but I fear you speak too kindly. Henri shifted uneasily. If I may, I think Madame la Comtesse feared something more than a rumor. She feared losing control. Armand turned to him. Control of what? Henri shook his head. I do not know, but the note repeated one sentence twice. He must not know. He? Armand asked. Henri nodded. You, monsieur. Armand looked toward Claire again, 1,000 unspoken questions pressing against the silence. But Claire lowered her gaze as if shielding him from searching too deeply. I do not know what she meant, she whispered. I swear it. Armand stepped back, gathering his thoughts. We will not guess. I will go to Paris. I will speak with her myself. Claire's breath caught. Please. Do not confront her harshly. I will confront her honestly, Armand replied. It is overdue. Henri bowed his head. Monsieur, if you do speak with her, ask her one more thing. Ask why she thought Claire's presence would harm you. That might be the heart of her fear. Armand nodded slowly. I will. Claire looked between them. I never wished to cause conflict in your family. You did not, Armand said firmly. You were wronged, and the wrong was never yours. Claire's eyes glimmered with a mix of grief and fragile relief. Hearing you say that helps more than I expected. Henri stepped back slightly. I should return to the inn. I have intruded enough. Claire touched his sleeve gently. Henri, you have not intruded. You brought truth. That is something few have given me. Henri's eyes filled with remorse. I wish I had given you truth years ago. Armand nodded. We will speak again later, Henri. There is more to understand. Henri bowed, then walked away slowly, leaving Claire and Armand under the sheltering willow branches. Silence settled again, lighter now, though still threaded with sadness. Claire finally spoke. Monsieur, what will you do next? I will leave for Paris within the week, Armand said. I must. I fear what you may learn, Claire murmured. I fear only one thing, he answered. That the truth I discover will show I could have protected you long ago, and did not. Claire stepped closer, not touching him, but standing near enough that her presence seemed to warm the air. You were not cruel to me. You did not dismiss me. You did not silence my letters or encourage the rumors. I did not prevent them, he whispered. You did not know, she repeated gently. There is a difference. Armand looked at her, his voice lowering. Claire, you have faced more sorrow than any woman should. I cannot undo the past, but I can ensure you never face hardship alone again. Her breath trembled. Monsieur, you must not make promises out of pity. Do I look like a man motivated by pity? He asked. She studied his face slowly, carefully. No, she whispered. Not anymore. Armand softened. Good. Claire shifted her weight slightly, her expression turning contemplative. When I returned to the village, I believed the world had forgotten me. But now, it seems the world had been hiding truths I was never meant to see. Truths you deserve to know, Armand said. She nodded. And when you go to Paris, I hope you will find answers that heal us both. Armand's heart tightened at the word us. He glanced toward the village. Claire, there is something else I must say before I leave. She turned to him, her eyes steady. When I first came here, I came to collect a debt, but now I know the true debt is mine. She blinked in surprise. Yours? Yes, he said softly. A debt of honor, of responsibility, of conscience. Your life was shaped by decisions made under my roof. I owe you more than comfort. I owe you justice. Claire felt her throat tighten. Monsieur, justice is not always possible. Perhaps not in courts, he said, but justice of the heart is. Claire lowered her gaze, touched by his sincerity but uncertain how to answer. Armand continued. When I return, I will come with clarity, with truth, and with a promise that whatever future you choose, you will not face it unaided. Claire lifted her eyes again, and for the first time hope softened her expression without fear beneath it. Thank you, she whispered. He offered a small, solemn bow. You owe me nothing, Claire, truly nothing. The wind rustled the willow leaves above them, and Claire felt something shift, an unburdening, a quiet lifting of a weight she had carried far too long. Henri's revelations had closed the last of her old wounds. Armand's words opened the first pathway to something new, something she did not yet dare name, but something that no longer frightened her. She drew in a slow breath. When you return, I will listen to whatever truth you bring. And I will tell you the last part of my story, the part I have kept for myself." Armand nodded gently. "I will be ready." They stood without speaking, letting the world settle back into stillness around them. Armand returned to the village after 12 days. 12 days of searching Paris, 12 days of confronting letters, servants, memories, and finally his mother herself. 12 days of unraveling the last of the knots that had bound Claire's fate to decisions she never chose. He rode with urgency, not from duty, but from longing, a longing that had grown clearer with each truth he uncovered. The village lay quiet in the late afternoon light, and children played near the well. Women paused to watch him pass. Men straightened their backs in surprised respect. Everyone recognized that the Count did not ride like a nobleman today. He rode like a man coming home. He stopped before Claire's cottage, breathless, not from the journey but from everything he needed to say. Claire stepped into the doorway at that very moment, as if she had sensed his arrival. She wore no shawl now, only a simple dress patched with care, her hands still dusted with flour from preparing supper. Her hair was loosely tied, and her cheeks carried the warmth of a woman who had begun to sleep without fear. She froze when she saw him. "Claire," Armand said softly. She whispered, "You came back." "I promised I would." He dismounted before she could say another word. The children peeked from behind her skirt, their eyes bright with curiosity and something more. Trust. Louis did not hide as he once had. Little Elodie clung to her mother, but without fear. Claire placed a hand on their shoulders. "Go inside for a moment," she murmured. "I need to speak with the Count." Louis hesitated. "Mama, will he stay for supper?" Armand smiled faintly. "If your mother permits it, I would be honored." Louis beamed and pulled Elodie inside, closing the door gently behind them. Claire looked at Armand with a mixture of courage and unease. "Monsieur, before you speak, tell me only this. Is the truth you found heavy?" "Yes," he said, "heavy, but freeing." She stepped aside so he could enter the yard. "Then come, tell me." They walked to the bench beneath the ash tree beside her cottage, the same place he had stood when he first saw her collapse, the same place where everything had begun to change. Armand sat beside her, not close enough to impose, but not distant either. "Claire," he began, "I found my mother. Was she well?" "Yes, and stubborn as ever." Claire managed a quiet smile. "And what did she say?" "She confessed everything. Not easily, but completely." Claire braced herself. Armand continued carefully. "She believed she protected me. She thought the rumors Julian created would spread to noble circles. She feared that if you remained in the manor, someone would say you sought favor with me. She thought removing you would shield my name." Claire lowered her gaze. "I was never important enough to tarnish your name." To her, every shadow threatened the family, Armand murmured. And Julian played on that fear. "He told her lies that painted you as vulnerable, susceptible, easily influenced. He led her to believe you admired me in a way that could be misinterpreted." Claire's face warmed with shame. "I did admire you." Armand's voice softened. "And that admiration was never a fault." She looked up at him slowly. Armand continued. "Julian confessed to her that he regretted stirring gossip. But instead of correcting his lie, he begged her to dismiss you quietly. He feared that if the truth came out, that he had mistreated you, he would lose his position." Claire's eyes filled with pain. "So, the two of them—" "Yes," Armand whispered. "They decided your resignation was the simplest solution." Claire nodded slowly. "I see." Armand leaned forward slightly. "There is more." "More?" he exhaled. "Claire, my mother found the letter you sent. She admitted she read it. She said she destroyed it, because she feared it would complicate my future." Claire's breath trembled. "I wrote begging only for fairness, not rescue, only fairness." "I know," Armand said gently. "I read the copy. She had kept a duplicate without realizing it." Claire's eyes widened. "You read my words?" "Yes." She swallowed. "Then you know." "I know everything," he said. "Every pain you endured, every hope you carried, every dignity you fought to protect, even when the world tried to strip it away." Claire looked away, blinking back tears. "And now, what changes with this knowledge?" Armand paused. His next words were not prepared. They rose from a place deeper than obligation. a place he had discovered only after leaving her. Claire, I did not go to Paris for justice alone. I went to understand what I must become to be worthy of standing before you. Her breath caught, he pressed on. When I learned what happened, I felt shame. Not for anything you did, but for everything I failed to see. For years I lived above the people who served me. I believed kindness meant distance, fairness meant silence, and leadership meant never involving myself in private lives. You were raised that way, she whispered. I never blamed you for it. But I blame myself, he said. Not for ignorance, I cannot undo that, but for not correcting the distance between us sooner, for letting your life fall apart while mine continued untouched. Claire shook her head. Monsieur, these regrets are noble, but they cannot change the past. No, Armand agreed softly, but they can shape the future. She inhaled, nervous. What future? He looked at her, truly looked, and she felt something shift under his gaze, something steady, unafraid. A future where I take responsibility, he said, not just for the wrongs committed under my roof, but for the life I wish to build now. Claire blinked. What life? He moved closer, not touching her, but closer than he ever had before. Claire, I admire you, he said, not the admiration Julian used against you, not the distant regard of a master for a servant. I admire you as a man who has seen your strength, your courage, your tenderness. Her lips parted slightly. I admire the way you protect your children, the way you endure hardship without bitterness, the way you speak truth, even when it terrifies you, she whispered. Armand, I admire you, he said again, in a way that leaves no space for pride, only honesty. Claire's hands trembled in her lap. Monsieur, this cannot be pity. I cannot bear that. It is not pity, he said firmly. It is affection. Deep, growing affection. Something I did not expect and can no longer deny. Claire lowered her head. But you are a count. I am a maid, and a mother, and a woman with no fortune, no family, no social standing. Armand gently lifted her chin, not forcefully, only enough for her to meet his gaze. You are the woman I choose, he said. Does that not count for something? Her eyes shimmered. And your children, he added softly, are children I already care for. Claire shook her head in disbelief, tears gathering. You do not know how hard this life has been. I would never want to burden you with it. You would never be a burden, Armand murmured. And I would never see your children as anything but blessings. She covered her mouth with her hands. You speak as though this decision is simple. It is not simple, Armand said. It is profound, and I speak it because I feel it. He leaned closer. But before I say more, Claire, you told me there was one last part of your story left to share, the part you kept for yourself. Claire stiffened slightly. Yes, there is something. Tell me, he said gently. She swallowed. I feared you would think less of me. I could not. Claire took a slow breath. The truth is that when I left the manor, I was not only fleeing the rumors, I was fleeing my own heart. Armand frowned softly. Your heart, she nodded. I admired you, deeply, and I knew that admiration would destroy me if I allowed it to grow. You were a count, I was nothing, and I believed the only way to protect myself was to leave. Armand stared, stunned. Claire whispered, I did not leave because of shame alone. I left because of you. He felt his breath stop. I loved you, she whispered, quietly, silently, hopelessly, and leaving was the only way I knew to save myself. Armand felt emotion rise so sharply he could not respond at once. Claire looked away. There, that is my last truth. You may think me foolish now. He reached for her hands, gently, reverently, and she let him take them. Claire, he said quietly, if you were foolish, then so am I, because I am falling in love with you now as deeply as you once loved me then. Her breath caught painfully. Do not say what you do not mean. I mean every word, he said. I love you. Not the idea of you, not your memory. You. Claire's tears fell freely now, and she did not wipe them away. Armand continued, I love your courage, your gentleness, your endurance. I love the way you have fought for dignity even when no one fought for you. I love the mother you are and the woman you are. She shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. Armand, this cannot be real. It is real, he whispered. More real than anything I have ever spoken. He took her hand fully in his. And if you will have me, Claire, I will build a life with you. A home for you and your children. A place where your past will no longer overshadow your future. Her tears fell faster. You would marry me, she whispered. A servant? A mother of two? He smiled softly. I would marry the woman I love. Whatever title she once held means nothing to me. Claire stared at him, trembling with hope she had not dared for years. Armand, do not ask what you cannot bear to defend. I can defend you, he said. I can defend our children, and I can defend a future we build together. Our children, she murmured, the words aching with wonder. Yes, he said, our children. Slowly, as if afraid the moment might shatter, Claire leaned toward him. Their foreheads touched, gentle, tentative, filled with all the words they had not yet spoken. Claire, Armand whispered, will you marry me? She closed her eyes and nodded. Yes, she breathed. Yes. Oh, yes. Armand drew her into his arms, holding her with the care of a man who finally knew what his heart had long been missing. Claire clung to him, not with desperation, but with the deep certainty of a woman who had finally found safety. Louis and Elodie burst from the cottage at that moment, unaware of what had passed. Louis froze when he saw Armand holding his mother. Mama, are you crying? He asked, alarmed. Claire laughed through her tears. Happy tears, Louis. Very happy. Armand crouched to meet the boy's eyes. Louis, may I speak plainly? Louis nodded, serious and brave. I wish to be part of your family, Armand said, if you will allow it. Louis blinked. You want to be my papa? Armand smiled gently. Only if you want me to be. Louis studied him for a moment, then threw his arms around Armand's neck with the fierce trust only a child could offer. Elodie followed, climbing into his lap with complete certainty. Claire watched, her hand pressed to her heart, overwhelmed by the sight. This warmth, this unity, this fragile beginning, was more than she had ever believed possible. Later, as the first stars appeared above the village, Armand and Claire stood hand in hand before the cottage. The children slept inside, curled safely beneath blankets that no longer felt thin or cold. Claire rested her head on Armand's shoulder. I never imagined a day like this. Nor did I, he whispered. But now that it is here, I cannot imagine anything else. She smiled, her heart full. Armand, do you promise we will build a gentle life? Yes, he said. A life free of fear, free of secrets, free of shame, and full of love. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, soft, reverent, certain. Full of love, he said, always. Claire closed her eyes, leaning into him completely. For the first time in years, her world felt whole, and for the first time in his life, Armand de Villiers felt truly free. He lifted her chin with a tender hand, and she met his gaze. Claire, he whispered. She answered with a breath that trembled like a promise. Their lips met, gently at first, then with the deep, certain passion of two souls who had walked through sorrow and found each other standing in the light. It was not desperation. It was not rescue. It was love. Quiet, steady, and entirely theirs. When they parted, Claire rested her hand against his chest. We begin anew, she murmured. Yes, he said, we begin, together. And with the moon rising softly above them, Armand drew her back into his embrace, holding her as though she were the answer to every question he had ever carried. She held him just as tightly. There, beneath the ash tree where misery had once lived, they found the beginning of joy. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.